thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for not minding the slight delay. I guess the panel that was here before had some technical difficulties, so they ran late. So we told them it was no big deal. So I figure we can just go through a round of introductions for those who don't know everybody up here, and then we'll begin. Cool.
Do you guys care if we videotape?
Hmm?
Do you guys care if we videotape or?
I think we are being
I mean, this is better.
I just don't know how to handle that, so I wrote this.
Go with the 3/4 view, black and white.
All right, let me just pen.
Michael prefers an antiqued look.
And see.
Michael, why don't you start? You start on that side.
Sure. My name is Michael Pucci. I work with the Dystopia Rising LARP Network. I'm one of the co-founders. The Imagination Collective, new projects have been set up, and currently CEO and primary game designer with Eschaton Media.
I'm Zdeb, co-founder of Dystopia Rising and Eschaton. All things paperwork, really.
I'm Sarah Lynn Bowman. I'm a LARP scholar. I wrote my dissertation on role-playing games. It's available as a book, The Functions of Role-Playing Games. Recently, I've been doing research on social conflict in role-playing groups and bleed, the bleed phenomenon. And so I've done a little bit of scholarly work in this area.
My name is Aaron Vanig. I'm the founder and executive director of Seekers Unlimited, which is an educational LARP nonprofit organization. I'm also co-founder of Live Game Labs, which is a LARP collective based here in Southern California. I've been LARPing for almost 30 years, and I guess I'm going to give a shout out because it is related to community. I'm working on a LARP census that should be released, a global LARP census that we're hoping to launch in the next month. We're just in kind of final stages of getting together so we can get community information.
I'm Shoshana Kesak. I'm sort of an amalgam of designer and academic. I just graduated from the NYU Game Center with a master's actually in game design with a focus on LARP. So I've published a little bit on LARP and social issues and content in the LARP community. I'm also a designer and one of the co-founders of Phoenix Outlaw Productions. And I've put out, I'm working right now on Dangers Untold, which is a LARP about young girls and their adventures. For ages 12 and up, and I'm also the co-writer of Dresden Lives, which is the official Dresden Files LARP, which is coming out shortly. So it's kind of
Anybody wants to just start? We didn't get a moderator, so.
Yeah, there's no moderator.
It's a free moderator. Oh, that's not
Ashley. Okay, so why don't we start it this way?
She's good at moderating.
Yeah, I've done this, but yeah, a couple of times before, so why not? So why don't we start actually talking about what the title of this, panel is a little bit about? I mean, like, tribalism can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people, but this is obviously an issue that we all came together and think very strongly about. So what does LARP tribalism mean to you? Let's do like a quick soundbite from each of you guys. And start with Aaron.
LARP tribalism is, I think, is related to allegiance to one certain group or style or person. So the kernel, if you look at like snowflakes, it starts with the grain of dust, and then the ice accretes around it into a snowflake. And I think there's usually a kernel that the tribalism attitude will accrete around, whether it's a person, a game, a specific game itself, or a specific style, or a specific location. Your allegiance will bias you towards that.
Yeah, very well described. And this is a social phenomenon that occurs in lots of different groups. It's not just LARPers or geeks, but it tends to be really intense amongst people from geek subcultures, and it's very interesting because there's something called the third-party hypothesis that this other group is geekier than me, or this other group is there's something wrong with them, but what I'm doing is fine. It's sort of a psychological mechanism to validate what one group is doing above another, and that can be really dangerous and toxic to the community at large.
Very much kind of what both of you said. We come at it from, or at least I come at it from a business perspective, and what tribalism in that is, what I do is good, what you do is bad, and how that affects how I run a game as a business. It's a huge aspect of it. The community that comes with a LARP is just as important, if not more, and what that does to the business of it can be really, really damaging when it's a negative piece.
Since it's been really well designed, I'd also just like to add in that gamer tribalism is probably one of the most destructive forces that we have in the LARP community that makes it so that we are staying in the shadow of the mockery that media has made of us instead of becoming something that really has the potential of being amazing. For me, it is sort of a subdivision of a subdivision of a subdivision of a subdivision, when together we would be much stronger.
Excellent. I just wanted to add actually on what Michael said. I think, so we're identifying a couple of different kinds of tribalism in the same sort of breath. So we have the tribalism that comes within the specific like geographic cultures, like where you have the individual game that grows up around, like what Aaron was saying, around individual people who then grow a staff and then grow a community around their game. We also have things like, the different kinds of LARPs that are out there, and sort of like, the Boffer style games and live combat and theater style and Nordic traditions and freeform, and how people can tend to tribalize into those different sections. But then we also have the geek tribalism that occurs, which is, I'm a video gamer or I'm a tabletopper versus LARPers, and how those biases can keep us apart. So I think there's a lot of different versions of tribalism that we can sort of talk about here. Yes, sir.
And I would even say that within games, particularly within large games, you have 250 people, you're going to have cliques within that game, and then you'll have factions that develop. And it's especially problematic, I think, in games that are designed to have factions. You'll see a lot of problems with groups, and this is where bleed comes in. And there's nothing wrong with conflict as long as it creates interesting drama, and as long as the players are really interested in playing that out. But if those emotions are bleeding out into the community, into out-of-character interactions, that's where you see a lot of problems with factionalism.
I want to kind of play a little bit of devil's advocate about sort of what I think can be a positive end of tribalism, because I've seen it. I don't agree with it, but I've seen this. I wrote an essay called Who Would You Think? Understanding Live Action Role Playing. And in it, I saw kind of basically an inclusive LARP culture and an exclusive LARP culture within it. And it is possible, and I was trying to argue, because I feel very inclusive. I want everybody to be LARPing whatever LARP they like and enjoy, and I want to find a LARP that you enjoy, because I would much rather have someone LARPing than not LARPing. And even if it's not my LARP that I like, at least you're playing something, and I figure that's better. But I sort of noticed with some, and I won't name names, and I say now I will not name names, hold me to this through the duration of this panel. Exactly.
But prod you to say names.
I know. So there was a group in America, so there's a wide range, that had they were very exclusive. But what it did is it's like this group intentionally wanted to be exclusive because we do not want novices to come into the group because we have to explain the whole what a LARP is and how to go and what the rules are. They wanted people that were veterans of LARPing, this style of LARPing, that they can go in and quickly jump into an intense situation that's very emotional. And it's very difficult to do that if you're inclusive and you're always kind of trying to welcome new people in. It gets difficult, I think, to explain it. Now, I don't agree with it, but they were like, we're going to be exclusive on this game, and we're going to do our thing, and we're going to quickly go as intense as possible. I don't agree with it, but I can see how some people might think that way and want to do that.
I can see the idea behind it, but something like that, I feel like it's just built to eventually wither and die.
Yeah.
Because, when you don't, if you're not welcoming new people into the group, then eventually, I found this in the games that I played, I don't know if this is for everybody, but, as you start gaming, generally, when you're younger, you have free time, you do it all the time. As you get older, people get married, people have kids, all the things you do when you grow up, and people stop playing. And so if you're exclusive like that, you're just slowly shrinking your player base until it's the same, 6 people.
It's the disadvantage to it, and in this group, it was like a specific duration of a run. Right. It was like for 3 years or whatever, I can't remember what it was, 3 years or 4 years, we're doing this, we're not taking new people, screw all of you.
Okay, so it was meant to be.
And then there's a fuse on this.
So that's an interesting point, is the idea that, and it has come up on a number of different occasions about games, that, we should have an open, inclusive atmosphere. I've written extensively about this and, about inclusivity, but that there are some games that are written specifically with an intention in mind to a specific player base or a specific idea, and it's run up against this issue of how open do you want your community to be, and is that going to change sort of the artistic vision of what you're trying to put forward as a game? I have my particular views on it. I'm just wondering, yeah.
I think part of the flaw is that we are defining the community by the game.
Okay.
I think what needs to happen is we need to have a separation of what we define as a gaming and LARPing community and what we have as individual games. Sure, I may like a particular game. However, I'm still a part of that community if I stop going to that game. It's one of the downfalls of our culture is that we assign so much of the community directly linked to a game instead of it being linked to a group of people. They're, coming from personal experience.
I once, after we started the network, we run Dystopia Rising, after we started Dystopia, probably a year in or so, we had stopped playing the games that we had played before, not out of anger or anything, we just only had so many hours in a day. I happened to be in Facebook conversation with somebody, and I mentioned, I've got games this week or whatever, and he said, oh, you still game? Of course I still game, of course, and it was kind of shocking to me in that moment of like, oh, I don't play his game anymore, and so to him,
You've disappeared.
I have stopped, I no longer exist in the gaming world. And I suppose that's the case just in life, you don't see somebody forever and you kind of forget that you're over there living a life too, people still exist when they leave, but.
It was one of the, I'm sorry, it was one of the things that I worked with Sarah on creating the Living Games Conference this year, which was the first academic conference in the US on LARP. And one of the things we did talk about was exactly this problem, that people are so disconnected in the academic world, but also in the design world and in these different communities, that there's really, that when you go away, you can go into your own little corner of the universe and sort of start forgetting that there's a larger community out there, so that we all end up starting reinventing the wheel over and over again, where we have design challenges that we all share as LARP designers or as academics even, and we sort of think that we're isolated in our own little corner of the universe. We don't realize that if we were talking to each other, we would have figured out a long time ago how to fix these things, or just how to share what we're doing in a really meaningful way to keep the artistic community healthy. So I think Michael's got a really good point about this, that we're forgetting the games are not the center of it. I think the hobby should become more of the crux and the love of that. Sarah, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, it's fine. And this is a really, really important point where the player loyalty is to the game rather than to the group. And one of the ways to kind of ameliorate that is to have a lot of out-of-game socialization where you have groups of people, and you can even ban talking about game. It's not going to work. But you can ban talking about game at the event. Just be like this.
Instead of banning it, just require them to buy you a drink.
Yeah. Yes, and buy you a
drink.
drink. If you're talking about your character, you have to buy the person a drink. But the point is that to sort of help with the negative bleed. Bleed is not always a bad thing, but if it's really negative, if there's a lot of so much investment in character and into game that it's sort of negatively impacting out of character interactions, kind of encouraging people, hey, let's talk about our real lives, or let's talk about this other fictive universe. And that's another thing that you can do is run other kinds of games, run one-shots, run some free form at night, have people have different kinds of experiences with each other. So what you're really developing is a community of players you're sort of training them in the style that you want in various different ways, so that that one game isn't the be-all end-all of their existence as LARPers.
And I think you said something really interesting there, which is training. I think what we're running into, like Ashley said, is the community does get older after a while. People are growing up there, and the people who were running games before are going to have kids, are going to have lives that they can no longer run the same games or put in the same time. Even if you are cultivating a culture of bringing in young people, sometimes you're bringing in people who are not, who don't know how to run games. They only know from learning from other people. But another great thing to do is to try to cultivate teaching the younger players how to actually run games. Bring them on as assistants into the games that you have, or even take somebody under your wing if they seem interested in writing their own games, and mentor them so that the community will continue to flourish, and you've got these new voices that can then start adding to the pile, so it's not the same 10 people who have to run games all the time, because I think every community runs into that, where it's the same 10 GMs. Eventually people get burnt out or have other things to do. And yeah, I mean, everybody, I think, has felt that way if you've been running games for years. Now imagine if you have a crop of these like new 16 to 18, 20-year-olds who are super excited about the new thing that they want to run, and they've learned from the generation that's come before, basically. So, and that can be part of cultivating the community outside of the game, like doing workshops and such.
Something to go back a second, you said, and then Michael, the idea of banning talking about your character out of game, I actually absolutely disagree with. And the reason that I disagree is because, and this is kind of a separate piece of kind of the culture of gaming. Gaming has a background. You know, gaming is sweatpants in your mom's basement. Gaming is all the things we've heard about, why gaming is bad. And I think that, and Michael certainly heard me talk about this, that gamers are their own worst enemy on this. In that when I go to work and somebody says, "What did you do this weekend?" "Oh, well, I did this thing, What I'm telling that person, if that's the first time they've heard anybody talk about gaming, what I'm telling them immediately is, what I'm doing is so bad and so weird and so embarrassing that even I, who do it, are embarrassed. And I think that when you have something like a social event where it's, you're not allowed to talk about game, even if it's for a good idea, a good reason is I want to interact with Chris. I don't want to interact with Wolfhammer Bane's sword.
His new character you've just given.
I would like to suggest that as the name of the podcast.
Yeah,
There's,
I've been meaning to create a character for New Jersey.
It's about 9. But what I'm doing is I'm establishing even within our community that like this is okay to do, but don't talk about it. Don't interact with it later. And that's not necessarily what you're going for, but in a world where I think where gaming is we're already fighting against being our own worst enemies. We're already fighting against grandma thinking that I'm sacrificing babies to Satan. I don't think we need to encourage that.
What I told,
If I could just clarify my point, because what I meant was that, especially with a campaign game where people are already really intensely involved, it's sort of like the thing with soft RP. It's like meaning role play between game sessions. How much invested do you want people to be in the fiction of the game during the off period? So I was just suggesting that sometimes it's good to actually get to know Erin rather than
I'm all for that. I'm
know the
absolutely all
person and
about
not the character.
Yeah.
I got a whole bunch of things to go in. They were leading a bunch of topics. One thing I always said regarding this stuff is to control the message. Control the message is the idea and how we are presenting ourselves as LARPers, as our LARP game is. Don't let the mainstream media define us. Don't let other people be saying what you're doing. They just get a snippet of it, and you're so embarrassed that you kind of hide it. You don't talk about how cool it is. So they just see, Wolfbane with a big sword, and you go, what the hell are you doing? I don't know what that is, and it's weird, but when you go, no, this is what's happening, this is what's going on, this is what the character's doing, he's getting out of the house, he's being active, he's doing this, he's socializing, he's a low self-confidence person, and here's all these positive aspects that are coming with that. And so you need kind of a spiel to get to it. And I'm going to read something real quick from this Nordic LARP book talk, which is from one of the big Nordic LARP conventions, 2011. LARP is live action role playing is like at the bottom of a hierarchy of geeks and nerddom. We are under like video games. Like video gamers are cooler because everybody does that. We're under role playing games. D&D is cool. Everybody's that. It's growing and it's changing, but for a long time it was underneath it. And I think this related to tribalism, at least in America, because there was my theory is that there was no single solitary LARP system that everybody could react to as there was with Dungeons & Dragons. Okay, there was Dungeons & Dragons, and that was the system, and everybody reacted. You either went with D&D and did some kind of D&D thing, or you reacted against it and did something different. And we didn't have that in LARP. We just all kind of sprung up like a bunch of wildflowers that went out, scattered around, and people started doing it. And one of the things I thought was so interesting is in this essay I have here called The Non-United LARP States of America. It was about unification and LARPing and why it didn't happen. This is free, by the way, if you look Talk LARP, you can get this essay, this book, free for PDF. Was one of the TSR designers, Harold Johnson, who's one of the executives at TSR, wrote, and I'm going to read this quote, "The policy to hold off permitting live-action role-playing to take place at Gen Con was primarily mine. LARPing was banned at Gen Con for years and years until Vampire and White Wolf cracked it. from the late 60s to the 90s, you could not LARP at Gen Con, which was the big mecca.
It was like 97, they finally cracked it, or 98.
And you could not even wear costumes. They tried to get the TSR employees in the late 70s, mid-70s, tried to do an assassin game, tag assassin game. Company memo went around and said, if we catch anybody doing this, you're fired, automatically. You could not do that at Gen Con. It was primarily mine. When James Dallas Egbert went missing, that's the Mazes and Monsters figure.
Does everybody know that situation that happened?
I can explain it. Let me finish this.
Yeah.
Let me finish this quote real quick. So when the James Dallas Egbert went missing, one of the things being suggested by the media was that role-playing was a game where you put on costumes and you ran around being somebody else. You acted out. You actually cast spells. You actually pull out swords and fight each other. You were not playing a game in your imagination. You were playing in reality. I felt that live-action role-playing gave our detractors an opportunity, a chance to point to it and say, this is what role-playing games are. And because of that situation, the satanic panic and everything, that it got banned, LARP got banned from Gen Con. And LARPers, to me, again, this is theory, never had a central system, a central hub, a central game, a central style that we could sort of band together around and see each other and go, because you can sort of see the D&D players. You see them with the books, or making characters, or saying, a D&D player, we have bonded. We are part of this larger community that plays D&D. LARPers, we didn't really have that, and we split up. So it's kind of a little bit of historical background that I think is relevant.
Yeah, I just want to give some context to that actually, so that so that everybody sort of understands what we're talking about. So back in the, I think this was in the 70s. I keep forgetting the date. There was essentially in the 70s.
79.
Yeah, there was a couple of instances in which people were basically reacting against role-playing games, and especially there was basically a death that was associated with it. That people basically were pointing then and saying, this is this strange kid who was wearing costumes and like doing this weird thing. And there was a bunch of moms who basically came out and said, my God, what are we going to do? Our poor children are like satanically worshiping, like doing spells and things in steam tunnels, because that's where this happened. And the problem is that became the view that was seen for LARPers for a very long time. And they took the satanic panic that happened around tabletop and blew it up even further, because these are people then who are actually going out and physically enacting things. So while tabletop actually seemed to be able to recover from this thing, especially in the media, LARP never quite recovered. And to this day, we are now seeing the same things over and over repeated. I did a bit of research on the media representations of LARP for a while, and we still have movies like The Wild Hunt, which represent Knights of Aston, which basically represent LARP as either places where people go and get high and do stupid things and then worship Satan and bring up demons, or where people lose the barrier between reality and fantasy and commit crimes against one another. Just the other day, like there was a kid who got high on LSD and as an elf and jousted somebody's car because he was like high on LSD. But like all they kept mentioning in the article was that he was live action role playing when he committed this act. Like this was the focus of it. And just as I got here, I actually, just to give you a context, I was going to ask you guys about this. Penny Arcade put out on Friday a strip, which was basically, which was apparently, Gabe's kid discovered LARPing effectively in the school ground. He came up with a game with his friends, and he told Gabe about it. And the cartoon says, yes, son, that's LARPing. You don't ever want to do that. Stop it immediately. It's that thing. Stop it immediately. It's the worst thing. That's exactly what it says. Tycho then responded in text about it and said, well, we didn't actually tell him that. What we did instead was showed him the lightning bolt video and tried to dissuade him from what he was excited about. The kid did not then get dissuaded, was still excited, and what Tycho wanted to tell him instead was that LARP was the place where you find people who want to bite you when you have sex, and basically that you're going to be a giant nerd for like the rest of your life. And it was just, every response that they had was the worst stereotypes of LARP that you possibly could. And this was what's being broadcast. So
this is coming from a nerd.
From a guy who makes his life basically commenting on video games. This is what we fight.
I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate on this. I think one of the reasons and how we deal with this sort of situation is we have to be more awesome. And it sounds silly, but it's the fact of the matter. It's the people who excel and have these high-end professional jobs, who are concerned about their public image. oftentimes they're not going, I LARP. And a lot of people who don't have that position where they have to hide it or feel they have to hide it are the ones that express themselves. Now, that lightning bolt video was recorded at the same site as one of our VR games up in Massachusetts. So, that's a very close to home scenario because I know the location. That kid was probably having a blast.
Josh Harrison, my friend, used to LARP with him.
Yeah.
Knows the guy.
Brandon
who was
Rauscher.
and he is still LARPing. Like nothing has changed. Like he's still that lightning bolt guy. He's gone and spoken about it, but he's still, LARPing and doing his thing because he has. What's that?
I'm not familiar with the lightning bolt.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
It's a YouTube video of, just a piece of a Renaissance LARP, and it's this kid just throwing packets and yelling. He's casting lightning bolts.
Lightning bolt, lightning bolt, lightning bolt.
Yeah, and
He's
it
throwing
just-
packets,
Throwing
saying
yellow
lightning
packets and saying lightning bolt as he's,
But that's all you see, and it's a
Yeah.
giant tree cardboard. It's actually a cool thing.
Yeah. But they take it completely out of context. There's literally no
Yes.
context.
So it's just, it's mocking, it's not like
Absolutely.
the guy that stabbed the car where it was someone who was doing
No,
something.
this is just
playing
this is
around.
not
This is
normal stabbing a car.
I think we all know about LARP is hard to video
Oh, yeah.
well, and it was, it's like
Even photograph, yeah.
it's a 30-second clip of what was probably
And it got millions of
very
hits.
epic
And
battle.
all the things.
It was shown on television, basically, actually.
So Tosh is
It was on talk shows and such.
On Tosh,
He did
I'll just be extremely brief. He does a segment called Web Redemption, where
Yeah.
people get a chance to talk about what was going on or whatever and redeem themselves. He was extremely ashamed of himself while he was talking about it and saying how ashamed he was that he spent all of this money in this hobby of his, etc.
I think it was a little different. The one I saw, not the broadcast one, but the one I saw, Brandon actually handled himself fairly well, I thought, and explained it, and he's like, no, I live on my own, and I work, I'm in the military, I got a girlfriend, and Tosh,
It was probably a different
dick to him.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to return to your initial question about the arcade thing, because I've been embroiled, while we've been at this conference, I've been embroiled in like 3 separate conversations about this thing.
I just discovered it before I got here, so I was like, oh, okay.
Because I knew that I needed to be.
We're live streaming, right?
So, the defenses that I'm hearing are, oh, it's satire. Okay, well, it's a strip, it's being taken out of context. Like, well, it's a strip, they're like, well, the story will follow up and there will be more to it, and this is a caricature and he's supposed to be the bad guy. I'm like, well, that doesn't really read to somebody who doesn't read the comic strip all of the time. And more importantly, these people have a following of hundreds of thousands of young people that really look up to them. And people's responses to that were, well, people can make their own opinions. Like, these are opinion leaders. They, are setting the stage for how, and so, that does hurt our hobby, I do think. Especially if, their response, which was quite honestly unintelligible for anybody who's not familiar with all of the references within it, didn't really have much redeeming in it, I didn't feel, so.
I'm wondering, I actually want to talk something. There's an interesting thing that I'm sort of thinking of that happens to tribes. We're talking about tribalism, where our allegiance are, where our tribe is. And it's very interesting to think about this penny arcade thing. I don't follow it, so I don't know about it. That geeks and nerds are saying, I'm a geek and nerd, and I'm flying my nerd flag proudly, but oh no, I'm not a LARPer. They're really bad. So a couple things that I think that brings up in my mind. One is that, is it possible that attacks on LARPing like this, because now there's an enemy, is that possibly a unifying force for LARPers? So that all of a sudden, someone attacks LARP, and Boffer LARPers and Vampire Theater LARPers go, hey, you're attacking us, screw you. And all of a sudden, Boffer LARPers and Theater LARPers are talking the same thing? They're saying, and do they realize that? And that's what I'm hoping to get to this stage, is that we as all LARPers identify as LARPers, as just, this is a thing I do, a hobby, sport, and art, however you think of it. And a vampire LARPer, and a boffer LARPer, and a military simulation, all this is the same thing we're all doing. This is our tribe. Let's expand the definition of what our tribe is really wide amongst all of this, and same with it. It's like, yeah, I'm a nerd, and if you look at, I guess, the Venn diagrams, all this stuff is considered part of it, because I see a lot of competition between LARPers and LARPers, and vampire LARPers aren't talking to, amp garters and vice versa, and things like that. And I love, Dystopia Rising, sorry, that is bringing this together, that vampire LARPers and amp garters, at least, one of their chapters, you have playing with vampire LARPers. And I love that, so is this the attack a bad thing?
By the way, I just want to say before we go on, because I know Michael was also holding, we're going to take questions. If I'm moderating, then totally there's going to be time for questions. So you guys have stuff.
I think without a doubt it could trigger more of a unification. However, do we really want the community focused on being negative reactive? I mean, truth be told, it was a comic. It was a comic on a web series. I've heard such worse things about this growing up in relation to LARPing. I think we would be better served just looking at other and going, yeah, it was a comic that made fun of us. We're still awesome.
Ashley.
I don't think, I would love to see all LARPing just kind of come together and just be LARP, but I don't think that's ever gonna, I don't think anything's ever gonna make that happen, not in a really kind of universal way. If only because I love, and this comparison's gonna be really bad because it's a thing I know. I love the Broncos, and you like the insert some other team from whatever sport the Broncos play. Which I don't know. But, I like this sports team, you like this sports team, now we fight. It's just, these are my people, these are your people. I want my tribe to, I want my tribe to get the food before your tribe gets food. We're going to breed and succeed while you don't. And that's, I don't think that it's different than that in a really
So it's a universal human thing, essentially what you're suggesting.
Yeah, I think that there's a thing that John Adams, a who I work with, and he has this theory that people believe that there is a deficit of awesome in this world, is the way he says it, which is that basically, people think that when we're coming out, especially with entertainment culture items, that there is a deficit of how much attention you're going to have. And I think this is actually true. People only have so much time in this world, and they're going to decide whether they're going to go read a book or if they're going to go play a video game. Then, if you're a gamer, it's are you going to play a tabletop game, or are you going to go play Call of Duty, or are you going to go out for the weekend and play LARP? There is like a time issue for people, so my tribe might get more people because my video game is easy to go play, but or a LARP, people are going to choose what they do with their leisure time, and especially with their leisure money. So I do think that there is an element of some sort of business aspect and commercialism to it, where we have to start talking about how many people can spend their leisure time doing what outside of their work. That being said, I think that there really that there isn't a deficit of awesome. People can still have as much awesome as there is out there, and you can create as much awesome, and it shouldn't scare us to continue to proliferate that even within our own culture, to be afraid of saying, okay, I'm going to lose 5 people because they're going to go play Aaron's awesome. And I do believe that having the entire community fostering more cool things is going to keep our community healthy. But there are some fundamental business concerns that come into these things that are outside of just the basic tribal aspect. Yeah, Sarah.
I definitely agree, and I think that some of the things that I've really been into are going to conferences and conventions like this. So Intercon, for example, wasn't really talking to anyone for a long time, but we're kind of moving in and kind of new people, new ideas, some intermingling of different styles. So you could go to these conventions, you can have your home game that you're really into, and then once a year maybe go to a convention when you play 5 or 6 games back to back and meet some new people and experience some new things. Maybe you can take some new styles home with you. There's tons of scenarios available online to play at home. Just take a core group of people that you really enjoy, 5 to 10, play a scenario, have some new experiences, and that costs nothing, and they're free. So it's, yes, there is a dearth in terms of investment if you're going to go spend a weekend, but not for an evening. And that's not really that high of a bar.
Talking about the investment aspect, part of the reason why we're having the difficulty from the outside and why people can't perceive how amazing our hobby is because we're improvising the equipment and tools that we use for this hobby. In one of the other panels that we did was on technology. There are much better ways that we could be doing LARP. or that we need to create enough of a market to make it so that businesses want to support that so that it continues forward.
So so let's talk about that a little bit more. Like taking it outside of our own tribe has been a problem that we've had for years. And I just gave my thesis defense basically on this the other day and had people from outside of the community looking at my work in LARP. And one of the things that I presented to them was there was a representative from an organization that does games that are for education and for stuff like that. And they were like, well, how do we reach people with games like for content? And I said, here's a booklet that I did on a game. You know how much that cost me? $2 at Kinko's. It runs and it's talking about military service, teaching people about representing in military service. We can do that with the amount of money it takes to go to Kinko's, as opposed to doing $2 million on a video game that people might not play. We do have these capabilities of like doing it low tech and impacting people as well. But I think that influencing, is part of the problem because we're not showing a sleeker UI. I think is the, to use the the term, the user interface of LARP oftentimes looks like a bed sheet, or it looks like something that came out that was cobbled together. When people want to look at a product, they want to look at something that's going to impress them. And that makes it really hard because it is a it came from a lot of hobby places. And I think that sort of sometimes can give us an unpolished look that as a genre of gaming that we oftentimes have to fight against. And that's certainly been my representation when I've gone out and talked to people in the digital world, in my education.
It's very difficult. LARP has a disadvantage just by its very nature, which is that it's such a personal experience, and so it's internal, and it's very hard to repeat that experience or contextualize it like you can a movie or music or a book, right? An author writes a book or a director and actors make a movie. It's that same thing no matter who sees it. The song is going to be the same, but a LARP, any LARP repeated is different, always. Even if you have the same player, it's going to be different. And so that experience is very personal to those people, even within the LARP. Oftentimes you got someone, this is the best LARP ever, this is the worst LARP ever, 2 different people, and you get that. So it's very hard for outsiders that are not participating to be able to understand what's going on because they're just looking at an outside thing where internally something very deep is going on and very profound, but exterior you're not seeing it because you're not going out for that. So it gets hard to understand it, and I think that we need to do more work, like we're suggesting, being open and being exclusive and explaining what's going on and bringing other people in, and showing them what is inclusive.
So, one of the things that politics have been very good at in terms of production values, definitely, but also in terms of documentation, having things to show people that look good and sound good. I wish you had brought the other one because they actually have a do book that has like really great pictures and descriptions of the games. Oftentimes part of this tribalism problem is that people only have their game, it's ephemeral and it's like within their community and that's it. So if, some random person becomes the representative for that, it doesn't necessarily reflect exactly what's going on. So one thing that we've been trying to do is documentation, and Shoshana and I are planning on doing a documentation this summer.
We're going to be talking about doing something about dystopia, basically, and we were going to talk to you about it soon. So,
why not now?
But hold on, guys. One of the things I've had the joy of recently is I'm working on the Dresden Lives, which is the Dresden Files LARP that's going to be published really soon, and. What's been exciting about that is actually when there have been groups across the world basically been playing LARPs of the Dresden Files, but they've been doing it with various different systems that they've ad hoc and they've put together. And when they heard about the fact that like this project is coming, all of a sudden I'm getting emails from groups as far away as Melbourne, or Russia. There's groups in Sweden, and they're all across the world who are like, we've been doing this, and now we can all do it together. And that community, like that interaction, means that I have a lot of emails to answer, but like at the same time, it's been really exciting to know that like there are groups that want to come together, and there have been consistently. We've had the Camarilla Club that's been doing that across the world. Franchised games like Dystopia Rising have been doing that to create a network. I was a staff member at Dystopia, and one of the greatest things that I loved about that was I came here last year to the convention and got to see a convention, module from the California people, and I get to go to Pennsylvania and see their game and meet LARPers and have a basis of our like comparisons, and then afterwards we go out and talk afterwards and meet as people. And so you have this huge community of thousands of people that have a basis upon which now you have friends across the country.
We actually just recently, we went to, last weekend we were up in the Pacific Northwest game, and we walked down, they have a beach on their site. We walked down to check out the beach, and a bunch of the people who had come up from the Texas game were there. And so we ran into them, like, hey, how's it going? We just started hanging out, whatever. And at one point we were like, oh, we should really go meet the locals at the game. We shouldn't just hang out with our friends. And then right after that we realized oh wait, we've only met these Texas people once before. But I feel like as soon as I see them, oh, it's Sarah, it's Charles, these are my best friends, and they're people I've legitimately only met one time before, and I met them as their characters. But we're all part of that group.
It actually makes a very strange situation that we have a game, we have an entertainment medium that is socially based. It is designed around taking people who have a similar hobby, putting fake masks on as characters, interacting with each other, these are my dolls, you can't see them, interact with each other, be social with one another, get to know each other, have friends, and for some reason we hit a border where you show me your LARPer flag, I've shown you my LARPer flag, now we can talk to each other because we're LARPers. However, we can't take that extra step and go into tangential communities that are effectively LARPing. We're from the East Coast. There's, in New York, Sleep No More. Theatrical performance, fantastic, a really moving experience. There's no way in hell you're going to convince me that that is not LARPing. Another one I went to was
Queen of the Night.
Queen of the Night. Went to Queen of the Night. Amazing, fantastic. No way in hell you're going to convince me that that wasn't LARPing.
Every ARG.
Every ARG that even large name companies are using as forms of advertising.
And actually in Europe, there was a designer who came over from Germany, and they do theater performances there, which actually take the next step. So Sleep No More has a thing where there's a barrier basically where you can interact only slightly with the people who are in the audience and vice versa. What they're actually doing over there is performances where you as the people who are in the audience are directly interacting with the performance, down to they have one where there's a bomb and you have to defuse it, and then there's puzzles, and when the guy was talking about it, I'm sitting there going, so you're LARPing? And he's like, no. And I was like, you actually, let's have a conversation. It's fun. Oh yeah, thank you. And they're doing really great work, but we all call it different things. And this terminology war that we sort of are having goes internally as well. I mean, one of the recent wonderful terminology wars was whether or not to call Nordic LARP Nordic LARP. And it was a great internal war that went on Facebook. It basically just ate its own tail after a while, and people just came back to the end of it. But we have this
LARP, parlor LARP,
progressive LARP.
progressive, contact safe, experimental simulation LARP.
I had reenactors and all
We're all
that.
just playing make-believe.
Yeah. So what is it about the naming problem? What is it about?
It's the tribalism thing though too. It's I LARP, you can do theater, but I do LARP. That's a tribal identity. And not just I LARP, but I do boffer LARP. That's a specific identity. Not just I do boffer LARP, but I do this specific boffer LARP, which has these, rules, etc.
I think it's also the stigma that goes with LARP and geek. And so I've had people who do reenactments all but punch me in the face because I made the comment that they're effectively LARPing.
You'll never get an SCA person to say.
Oh, you really that might be the biggest insult I've ever.
Tell an SCA that they're LARPing.
I just came to a realization that it could be that we have such a passion for LARPing that we are running into the same thing as, say, a Scotch aficionado would have. Well, I do like Scotch, however, I actually prefer single malt blends, Highland preferably because I don't like peaty taste. Maybe a sherry cask that's been aged for at least 14 years.
We get possibly LARP snobbery.
Yeah,
It's actually
same
pretty
thing.
much LARP snobbery, that this is the way to go. Mike Young, East Coast, by name names, damn it. did a, but he's got his name on it, 5 stages of LARP group development.
Yes.
And it was saying that like, and this was in the days before the internet, and I'm so glad to be here at this convention that's going on and the people are going, because I know we're changing, we are changing, I see it. The fact that the first stage of LARP group development is we invented LARP. We invented it, it didn't exist. Oh, it's in my book. I can say.
Glad you have a librarian right next to you.
Yeah. So these are my counties. I got my last one. 5 stages of group. Our group is the only LARP, less common with the internet. Number 2, ours is the best LARP. Number 3, there are other LARPs out there, but I prefer this one, majority of US LARPers. Number 4, I enjoy playing many different LARPs. And number 5, I not only enjoy many different LARPs, I actively seek out and try to find new LARPs to play and expand my experience. And the problem is everyone reacts badly to that because it's like, oh, there's stages and you're saying that you're better than me and it's elitist and this is all happening. And it's not phrased correctly, but I think that the concept of just sort of looking at things, being able to categorize how are you looking at LARP in your LARP is similar. And that's the early stage of tribalism. Coming into people who are like, yeah, okay, this is the best one. I've been other ones, but now we're the best. We're the best LARP. Unfortunately, we're out of the days when I started where we thought we invented LARP. Like this was it, we invented it. Nobody else did this. Oh, there's other people. And I was so happy to get in touch with LARP Awards. Joe Valenti's disastrous LARP Awards. It's horrible. But I
Name names again.
Thank you.
I know,
Right here.
but
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it.
You didn't have your glasses on, it's okay.
sorry. But the best thing happened at the LARP Awards. We just worked on it with Joe. But it was, but to its credit, it was very profound for me because I realized that there's LARPs around the world. People were very involved and very detailed with it. And I met them and I talked to them. That include Ibrahim with Wyrd and Rick and Adrian and everything. And I'm meeting all these people and I go, this is going on everywhere. We are all doing the same thing. It's different styles, it's different types, and you've been doing it this year, so you've been these characters. We're all doing the same thing, and it's cool. And this just went my attitude, I want to know what you're doing, how you're doing. How are you handling character down? How are you handling new players? How are you handling level advancement and skill development and all this other BS we talk about? I want to know what you're doing and steal it. And this attitude, and I'm hoping to encourage more people, the discussion, the internet discussion, and mainly realizing that we're all kind of doing the same thing and that we can all learn from it, and that I want to share the cool things that I've discovered and done by whatever LARPs I've run or played, and I want to know the cool things you've done so that I can improve my LARPs and play it.
And I think those stages, by the way, have also been going through very recently, especially because of the internet and technology, where we've seen people are way past the stage of like, I've invented LARP, where they're now up to the points where they're either saying like, you know, my LARP is still the best LARP. There's a lot of people still stuck in that place, but you have people going all the way to the gamut of the last one, which is, you know, I try other LARPs. There was a great term that came up the other day actually online, and I want to steal it, especially considering we're talking about tribalism, where they're talking about people who go from LARP tradition to LARP tradition and go to different communities, and somebody called people like that LARP nomads, where they're basically like, they're nomads who like travel from place to place and experience cultures and understand. And I was like, I really like that idea. I consider myself now kind of a LARP nomad, where I'm like, all right, I want to learn from as many places as I can. But also, I think there's a lot of us now also who want to foster those spaces as well. And I think that's again why we're here sort of on this panel, or why like I organize living games, or why, you know, Michael can probably talk and Ashley about the Imagination Collective a little bit more. And like, you know, these are spaces that are being created where people from all different kinds of traditions of LARP can come together and create new ideas, as opposed to us, you know, going back to our different spaces and going, well, I'm inventing this now. You know, I invented LARP in my, Lizzie started to put this in her talk at Living Games, where she's like, yes, I invented LARP in my backyard in 1985. Like that's sort of where this has been for so long. Now we have these options to create these spaces where everybody can come together and be nomads together, maybe in this new community of bigger nomads. I don't know. Yes, sir.
I was just going to say that the internet is fantastic for this. It can also be problematic, obviously. But on Facebook, we have LARP Haven, which is now up to 1,400 members from all over the world. It is North American dominant, but due to some rather active conversations on there was an influx of, like, what, 50 Swedes at one point?
In about one day.
So there is a lot of interesting interaction going on. There's also a North American group, there's International LARP Cooperation Group, and the LARPettes, which
The LARPettes, which are for, you know, women's group,
Women's
basically,
group.
yeah.
So there is some cross-pollination going on in these online groups, which I think is really
What's good, what I, at WyrdCon 2, I said, these are 3 things that I want. This was LARP 2, or WyrdCon 2. Number 1 is I want a LARP census. Number 2 is I want a LARP calendar. And number 3 is a LARP archive to get those things. And those 2 are coming out. The LARP census, so just a quick plug, is a global LARP census, and we're pulling them like, where are you, how long have you been LARPing, what's your age, gender do you identify with, but also attitudes of LARPing, like I prefer LARPs that are small and intimate, I prefer big, high production value LARPs. We're asking about a whole bunch of things. We want to continue to do this, and we want to, basically, there's kind of a subtle thing that I'm doing here is I want this to go out to as many LARPers as possible. It's a census. I really want to try and count as many self-identifying LARPers as possible. But at the same time, I want all these people to see, like, wait, they're LARPing in New Zealand? They're LARPing in Japan? Just as they see and answer the question, you realize there's LARPers out there. The next thing is, and this just came out, LARPing.org put out a LARP calendar.
Yep.
It finally came out, they just got out of beta test or something like that, which is a global LARP calendar. So you can go look at a map, and you can see all the little push pins of where LARPs are, and you can search it.
Amazing.
You can search it for vampire LARPs and stuff like that. And one of the things, because a lot of things cause tribalism, I think, and excuse me, one of them is the labeling of, I lose my train of thought, the labeling of what each thing is, what style stuff is, can be, you know, the name of the label, yeah, exclusionary. You don't see things, or you just assume all LARPs are in there. That you're like looking for a certain thing and you're not seeing it, but you're seeing something that's close.
Well, somebody actually asked me when I was doing my thesis defense show, people who are not familiar with LARP, were asking me, so what constitutes a LARP, actually? And I was like, uh-oh, here's a question. And they were like, well, does the game Werewolf, like where you're, you know, or Assassin, does that count as a LARP? Does you know, me playing in my backyard, does How to Host a Murder Mystery, is that a LARP? And so we got into this like question, and I was like, you know, there are lots of things out there that we might consider LARPs that are, you know, that might draw from the same audience ship, that might have people who are similarly interested. But because we, like, the definition war is one that we get into a lot, but what we're reaching for is the same thing. We're trying these roles out in a live experience, and that's what I broke it down to when I said to them. I said, LARPing is you are exactly doing that. You are going out and you are role playing in a live setting. It can be as simple as that. It can be as complicated as a rule book that's 400 pages long with 300 people and lots of costumes. But that's where you start, and then you can explore this wide range of this like media that's so rich.
Hopefully there's something there. I remember my train of thought, so I'll finish. The idea is, the phrasing is in addition to, not instead of. I think this is very crucial to a lot of LARPs and the LARP calendars, is that when I say something else is coming out that most people are thinking of, you're trying to replace my LARP. I'm in a LARP, and now you're talking about your LARP, you're trying to replace that. You're trying to take my player coaching. You're trying to do that, and I'm hoping that the attitude grows, especially with the LARP calendar and the LARP census, that like for the LARP calendar, there's tons of LARP calendars out there. There's an East Coast one, there's a Southern California, there's tons of LARP calendars, but they're not unified. And I'm hoping that when the LARPing.org calendar comes out, that people don't go, oh, they just want to take this stuff and delete us, or, you know, no, we want you to keep your LARP calendar, and in addition to, put your LARP on this other universal calendar. And this attitude of in addition to, not instead of. We're not trying to replace someone else's time or devotion or something. We want this in addition to.
Actually, we've run into that, just that the player coaching, whatever, even within the network itself. Some of the games are closer than some of the others, and we've had problems with games coaching players from the neighboring game, which I think, at least I suspect, comes from the idea that there are only 7 LARPers. Obviously not 7. You know, that there aren't millions people in Japan, people in Sweden, there aren't thousands of us, which there are. There are instead only these ones that I see right here, which might be a part of, you know, what you see in front of you is the only reality that exists. But, you know, that I have to go to this other game to get players, because I'm not going to be able to find them anywhere else. A big part of how we advertise for DR and where we get our players are non-gamers. You know, we don't go to other games. In fact, I can't drive home enough to our other directors, don't go to other games for your players. Because not only are you not going to you're not going to find success because of that whole, this is mine, you're new and weird, go away. But you're a jerk if you do it. Like, it's just bad form. And that goes again, it goes against the idea of DR, which is really very much community, very much we're all cool, hanging out together.
The vast majority of the players that we have put together for them are first-time LARPers.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'd say easily 50%.
And that actually takes us back to one of the things that we mentioned a little while ago, and then I'm keeping an eye on the time so we can have questions. But one of the things that we mentioned before is that some games want to be exclusive towards having a specific style of player, whether that's, well, we want players who have been here for a really long time, or we want players who have been. But there's also, do we win or lose by doing that? You're talking about having brand new players that you're bringing in all the time. And that grows the community in ways that is going to make us better, as we were talking about before. Is there? Let's talk about that exclusivity for just 2 seconds, so I can take it on seriously. And this is a hot seat question, I know, for a lot of people. Do you think that there is a place in our community now for games that are, whether short-term or long-term, that are written for, specific groups, that's written for an exclusive group, whether that be based on, I'm gonna hit the hot button for a second, whether it's based on gender, whether it's based on players who are more knowledgeable than others. Like, what do you guys think? Because we're talking about a unification of the community now. What do you think about the issue of exclusive games? And we'll keep it as tight as we can. Let's start with Michael, because he looks like he's ruminating.
Back when we were, we were helping Lizzie get a site for Mad About the Boy. The question came up that it was going to be a women's only LARP, and I had the response of, I don't know how I feel about that. Not because I think it's a bad thing, because I honestly sit here and I go, does it help the community, does it harm the community? Is our community mature enough to be able to handle that? God, I hope they're mature enough to be able to handle that. That'd be dumb if they weren't. But looking at it, I think that an exclusive game has a place. However, we need to define the community being separate from the game before an exclusive game doesn't do anything other than serve the same people. An exclusive game doesn't add any new people. It doesn't invite people in. It causes an environment where you have a select group of friends or a handful of people that you're choosing based on whatever demographic. That doesn't bring more people in. Or if it does, very limited. So what we need to do is we need to focus on separating that community and game aspect so that you're doing a game over there that I can't be a part of, and that's cool because I'm still part of the greater community.
Ashley? I am not a big fan of the idea, and I think that it just continues the idea of this is mine and that's yours, stay over there. Even when it's, and don't be let me on fire for this place, but even when it's a game that is exclusively for a group that may have been a minority in the past or is still a minority, because all that's not saying we're all equal, that's saying we're not worse than you, we're actually better than you because you're not allowed in. And it's just, I think it's just turning it around. And I don't think it's not saying we're all the same. It's saying now I'm better than you, rather than you having made me feel like you're better than me. Sarah?
I think it kind of goes back to what Aaron was saying about in addition to, I don't think Mad About the Boy was intended to be a game that says we're going to have our group and nobody else is allowed. It was a one shot, it was just one weekend, and the idea was to introduce people to Nordic LARP and also to create a women's space, which is very rare in LARPs, to just have a space with women in it. And it actually was, the players were from all over the world. So, technically all over the world. So, I made connections with people in Columbus, with people in San Francisco, people that I would never have known, like, Abby, I would never have gotten to, and I got to role play with her for 3 days, which was fantastic. So I think that it didn't like create an insular community that now doesn't interact with anybody else. I think it actually created more excitement for LARP in different kinds of ways. So I think that as long as it gets brought back out to the larger community, having an isolated game is not a problem. I will say that the Nordic LARP community, one of the reasons that they have been so successful is because they do have exclusionary games. And by that I mean that you kind of have to know people in the group. It doesn't mean that newcomers can't come, but you tend to have somebody who's invited you. And that is problematic, and it is considered elitist by some people. However, if you have a group of 30 people that you've done like maybe 3 weekends full of workshopping with, and you've done trust exercise, you've done all this stuff, you can kind of go to deeper levels. So there's pros and cons to the exclusionary thing, for sure.
Yeah, that's the thing, that I said, that you can, if you are exclusive, go in really deep into something like that. But there is, I think there's exclusive LARPs all the time. Age, right? I wouldn't have an 8-year-old play Dystopia Rising. Yeah.
I have had,
You can't. There's some things that I would not have certain people play certain types of LARPs based on whatever it is, and so it's not completely 100% open. But the idea is that like Michael and Ashley were saying, Ross, is that look at it as LARP, not necessarily the game. Get the LARP loyalty rather than the game loyalty, because and having some exclusive LARPs is fine. It's like, okay, we're running this LARP that's for women only. You can't do that, but in 2 months, 3 months, whatever, next year, I'm running something that anybody can play. Or if you don't like it, what I try to do is find out what someone likes in LARPing, and I try to direct them. I try to know about as many LARPs here in Southern California as I can, and direct someone to something like that, right? So I might not be running or know something that you want, but someone else does. I just keep trying. I did an interview for a Wyrd Con a couple years ago with a comedian who was doing a podcast show, whatever. And his producer's like, you guys are weird, I don't want to do this. And I'm like, no, I bet there's a LARP that you'll like. Same thing I do with like gin or scotch. I know I'll find one you like. And I say, you like it? No, I hate fantasy and Lord of the Rings, I don't want to do that. And I go, okay, science fiction? No, like sort of Western. What? You do Western LARPs? And me, I go, yeah, I did this Western LARP. It was at the saloon. It was a porn ranch that we ran in Malibu. And, we're all doing this. And she's like, let me know when we do that. Let me know, are you going to do that again? And it was this huge interest on a Western LARP, because she loved cowboy, loved that. And it's like, yes, I will override this animosity to LARP style or genre because I like this community. And what I say, again, one of my big lines is, fantasy boffer campaigns are to LARP, our superheroes are to comic books, in that they're most colorful, they're the most prevalent, they keep coming out. However, this is not the sum total representation of LARP. And that's why I love all these other LARPs are coming in. So a LARP that's all female LARP based on a comic book, or LARP based on post-apocalyptic zombies, or starships, or Battlestar Galactica, or anything. The fact that more of these come in, the more people are talking to each other, the more people we get, because we'll tag into their other nerd thing. Like there's an XCOM LARP going on in here, video.
Here's the LARP.
There's an XCOM LARP, you know what I mean? So the more this stuff comes out, the more we can expand, the more we can grow, the more that our tribe, the boundaries of our tribe become LARP and not, I play, not naming names, LARP. I play this LARP, and that's it, and no other LARP exists. And,
Yeah. I think on my feeling on it, like you've pretty much expressed a lot of what I feel in general. I'm of the opinion, like I have, based a lot of what I write on inclusivity as a major deal for me, especially when it comes to taking it on a separate level about physical inclusivity and about people's boundaries and trigger warnings and safe spaces and such, making sure the LARPs are as safe as possible for everybody so that they can feel welcome to be included. And I've done like 2 years effectively, I think, of research at this point about this. And what I actually came down to after writing all of these articles is that it's not about, not every game really is going to be possible for everybody just based on their own personal needs and their own personal feelings. And like the same way that I wouldn't necessarily like eat a peanut butter sandwich because I'm allergic. Like I'm not going to go to a LARP that's about something that deep down inside is going to trigger me and make me really uncomfortable and unsafe. that doesn't mean that the LARP shouldn't be there. It doesn't mean that I should be like so grossly offended by that it shouldn't exist. And I had this conversation when we were in Sweden this year, talking about, you know, games that have offensive content or difficult content or stuff. And a lot of people are like, well, I'm offended and this shouldn't exist. And I've come down actually on the side of saying, I believe LARP is an art. I do believe it is, as well as a game form, it's an art, and therefore I believe in a freedom of creativity, that people should be able to create, and you know, I'm ready to duck things as I say this, but like people have the right to put whatever content they want in their art, as long as they're willing to take responsibility for that. And so therefore, like, they should be aware that, like, if you put something in it that's gonna make, like, other members of your tribe or people on the outside, uncomfortable or feel unwelcome, you have to just take responsibility for what you've put together. That being said, that means that some people may feel like they don't want to go to a particular LARP. That's cool, because just like Erin said, there's plenty of LARPs out there, and we have the opportunity to say, well, I might not want to go to that particular game, but next month I might see you at a different one, and that'll be cool because we're still LARPers and we're still in the same place. So, and that breadth of being able to say that and not turn against each other, because I've seen a lot of that where, you know, you're writing that game, oh, therefore you're bad and you shouldn't be in the community. As long as we keep cultivating this space of like creative freedom and allowing people to create, and encouraging people to create openly, we're going to have more of a healthy community for people to feel like they can express themselves, and we're going to have more options for people to play in.
I think it's up to a lot of organizers that if you're talking to someone, so here's your homework for everyone, is like when someone's asking like, what's this LARPing thing, what do you do? And you probably describe your favorite LARP or whatever it is, and they go, and they're not going, they go, okay, you don't like that? Here's another one.
Yeah.
Recommend someone else's game. Recommend something. Well, what do you like? What kind of things do you like? What attracted you to ask me about LARP? And be into it and be open about it, like at work. You know, I tell my mom that, you know, I'm LARPing and stuff like that. You know, I want this word to go out there. I don't like it, but the word LARP. But I want more people to know about it. And like I said, if more people are saying, like, here's the LARP, oh, you don't like this one, you don't really want to play, you don't feel comfortable in this, okay, here's something else. Or go to the LARP calendar and look for something else in your area or something else you might like. Because again, my goal is just get you LARPing. I don't care if it's something I hate, I would never want to be a part of it. As long as you're doing it, I'm
And
the community.
I will say just a funny story before, I think we're about time for questions.
I mean, we can run over since.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so we have a thing.
There's nothing again until like 9 or so, yeah.
Excellent. Cool.
8 o'clock, you're fine,
Okay.
yes.
So the funny story was,
No,
speaking
Erin, you're here forever.
you can't leave. The funny story was, you know, I was at this show that I had to showcase LARP opposite digital projects that were developed by my co-conspirators at the Game Center. And there was a camera crew coming around interviewing us about a documentary about game culture in general. And I'm normally hesitant about talking about LARP on camera, which, you know, we could all talk about that a little bit in a second. But like, when they came around, I had to sort of give a spiel about what LARP was about. And the person who was interviewing me, I had a whole table of different things from LARP, like little relics. And it was interesting to see what his eye would catch on. So it went from, I had the books, and I had like the Nordic LARP book, and I had the photos, and he went right for the Nerf gun. Like, he just went right to the Nerf gun. And he's like, so you're the only table that's got a Nerf gun. Why is that? And I was like, well, my question to you is, why do you like the Nerf gun? Like, what is it about that? And then I told him about using Nerf guns in games. And another person came to me later and went straight over to the sword or the mask that I had there. And it was watching them pick out what it is in their interest that can catch them. And speaking of mothers, my mother was there to support. And the funny part was, is my mother used to think that gaming, she believed originally when I started LARPing that I had a gambling problem. Because I would go
Probably a money loss
That's
problem.
exactly it. I would go away for a weekend and I would come back poorer. So she didn't understand that there was another kind of gaming where you would lose money and like you have shit noise.
And masks and swords and guns.
But she sat through my entire thesis defense show and listened to me talk about LARP over and over and over again to different people. And she came to me afterwards and she said, I get it now. I understand what you're talking about because it's so different to each person here, isn't it? And each of these games is so different. And I've now listened to you give this spiel 17 times, but literally it was like, I was 6 hours of talking. And each time you manage to find something else, from a dancer who wants to talk about how you choreograph combat, to a psychologist who wants to talk about games like Capo and Prison and the Nordic LARPs, or theater techs. All these people, it all ties in, doesn't it? And I was like, my mom gets it. Everybody can be taught if my mom gets it.
So
Yes.
is your mom Copenhagen?
No.
Well, and I just wanted to, along those lines, echo what they're saying. I know it does feel like homework, but I do think it's important for us to educate ourselves on the different kinds of games out there. And that's one way to break out of this tribalism mentality. It's very easy to think that your game is the best game if that's all you're constantly inundated with. But even it doesn't mean you have to play other games necessarily, but I mean just reading about them, listening to other people, asking people questions. Tell me about your games. How high is the immersion? How long do you play? I mean, I ask people questions like this, do people create character? So I want to know what their game culture is like, where they're at.
And there's a lot of resources now that there weren't before. There are blogs that are out there. If you look for them, I'll shout out to a couple of them. Is the Badass LARPer and Confessions of I keep forgetting.
Confessions of a Wrathful LARPer.
Yeah, Confessions of a Wrathful LARPer. And if you just Google and go around, and there's also articles. I know that academic articles can be terrifying, but there's a lot of them out there, especially from the Communipunk Journal, the Wyrd companion book that's coming out of this convention. There are resources to great things to read, not just about individual games, but about the theories behind design. So that you can reach out and try to find a way to maybe that you're interested in creating something that you never thought you could, but now you're reading about somebody who's been researching it for 15 years or something. And you guys are the Imagination Con. I'd love you guys to talk about that a little bit. So
It was actually a project that we're putting together as a sort of parent umbrella for running individual smaller scale LARPs. One of the biggest issues that we run into, there's three major issues. The first is not having a language to describe what type of game it is. You can say that you're looking for a single shot, an emotional, you don't know when you're going to LARP what to expect. So trying to put together a language that applies across LARP.
Not necessarily a rating system, but that sort of I can just pick up a video game. Oh, that's what I'm getting myself into.
Terminology.
Yeah. Which also includes applying a community standard, where being able to say, these games agree to be safer spaces, these games agree to be locations where gender, race, age does not matter, no discrimination, and having the community hold those games to it. But on top of it, it's also a workspace where there are blogs up there. I've got Behind the Coffee Cup with Tyler Nerdin, where I explain a lot of my design concepts as I'm writing things and what the meanings behind things are. But the idea behind it is, one of the problems we run into is a lot of LARPs have a difficulty funding. Insurance is expensive. Being able to handle taxes is difficult.
And the organization side of things is sometimes difficult. There's plenty of people who want to run stories, but not necessarily people fluency with the background of it. And so the intent is to offer the ability for games to say Shoshana wants to run a game. Shoshana's going to do it herself, but Shoshana has somebody else, wants to run a game but doesn't necessarily have, the insurance for it or the business or all of the stuff that goes behind it. She could come to Imagination and we can set that all up for her in agreement. She, will run these games by our standards, but these standards of safe space, etc.
I don't want to take a nap once and let you guys help me out. Yeah, whatever. So.
You're not allowed to now.
No.
Sorry.
So cool. We got it's 1:45, so I figured we have some time to open it up to questions, and then if there are no questions, I can just keep asking really pushing questions. But let's see. Does anybody have questions, comments, stuff that you wanted to toss out at us? There you go. Do it.
I think we talked a bit about healthy attitudes, I guess, towards other LARPs, and similar ones and completely different ones, and ones which are styles that we like or we prefer or not. But what about encouraging those healthy attitudes in, you guys are all organizers for the most part, so encouraging those attitudes in your players, for example, because I don't And in our area, there's sort of a lot of new stuff cropping up, and there's sort of this bitterness that I don't like. That's a little bit. It's starting up, and I kind of want to help discourage that because I want these other groups to be part of a LARP family. And there's different kinds of people with different preferences, but I sort of want to encourage the players to see it that way too. And I don't know, maybe can we talk about that?
Yeah, we absolutely have spent a ton of time on it. There are a million games in New England and really Jersey and up. And we found that it starts with the people at the top of the organization. You will never ever hear Michael or I ever say a bad thing about another LARP. What I say, once the hotel door shuts, might be different. But to the world, I will never speak poorly about another game, and it's for that reason. It's even if this isn't a game, even if personally I think that game is absurd, it doesn't matter, because if they're having fun with it, then I hope that they have the greatest success ever. Games that I've stopped playing, that I'm kind of shocked are still running, I still think that I hope they're having a great time, and that is always, always, always what we say, and it builds from that.
It's a strange sort of environment when you're organizing larger games, whether you want to be or not. People sort of take some of your cues from you, especially when you have younger players or people who are looking for a place to belong. So the best advice I can always suggest is, if you want to see change in the community, if you want to see a positive environment, if you want to see that culture, you have to be ready to lead by example. You have to be the change you want to see. Greater man than he said that.
I'm just going to toss in to add on to that. One of the major research things that I did was about the power structures in LARP communities, and as much as we don't necessarily always want it to be the case, because of the nature of the way that we construct our stories in LARPs, like the GM idea is that the GM is the power base, and then everybody below kind of looks to the GM. You were talking about this online actually, I think the other day. Because of that, socially, the same thing gets mirrored. So in a lot of communities. So like what Michael is saying is, naturally people are going to look in the community towards the staff members because that's where the authority comes from. So if the authority in character and in game is coming from there, they're going to be looking for the same cues when it comes to the socialization and especially the manner by which they treat other games. So if the staff members are going to be positive and are going to be looking at other LARPs and encouraging, that's where it's going to come from, and encouraging that sort of thing in your players, and rewarding that when you see it with a positive thumbs up to the people who are doing that and who are being encouraging, and just sort of discourage actively when you see it in people who are being negative, and is the way to do it, because that's where the power structure is.
I also try really hard not to worry about it in everybody.
Yeah.
We worry about ourselves and we worry about our staff members, and I encourage, they've not been trained, but they've grown into the habits of not talking badly about other games, and so then when they see other people talking badly about games, they discourage it and they encourage positive talk, and it kind of, it grows from there.
Sarah's going.
In Austin, I run a monthly LARP meetup, and it's basically a space kind of like this where one person speaks at a time, and we have a 2-hour discussion about topics, like theory, or what do I do in this situation in game, or questions like the one you just posed might be a topic for the LARP meetup for an hour, and we very specifically avoid favoring one game, even though almost all of us play DR. It becomes difficult not to talk about that one game, and since it's our shared reference, but we try very hard not to talk badly about other games, and that's one of the things that, making it clear that anybody who comes to the meetup can talk about their game, can share for 5 minutes, tell us your thing, don't go into too much detail, but if you have an event that you want to promote, here, send around a flyer or something like that, that might be an option. but it has to be a consistent thing. I mean, I do it every single month, whether I want to or not, and we've been doing it for like 2 years, 3 years now. So basically, people know that they keep coming and that, you know, everybody's welcome.
There's a lot that you can do to build a community, and these are obviously great things to do and talk about it. And one of the reasons that I wanted a LARP calendar so desperately is that so LARPs aren't bumping weekends, right? And you know, there's obviously a limited resource sort of thing here where, you know, there's only so many campsites, let's say, if you can camper LARPs. And, you know, LARPs might compete. So a LARP calendar is you can see, they're running this one, so we'll go next weekend, or we'll go the weekend before, and share it and stuff like that. Also talking to the other groups and just saying, when are you doing your games? You know, we're thinking of running sometime in April. You know, did you have a weekend in April? So we don't butt heads or something like that. Also, there's some LARPs I know DR here gives points if you go like NPC for another LARP. You actually give in-game rewards if your players will go to this other LARP. And one thing that was at Intercon, the other LARP convention on the East Coast, the panel last time was they were actually trying to get like a costume prop library warehouse, which I thought would be awesome. In other words, if you got 1 million LARPs, what if you had a space and everybody chips in, you know, you do a Kickstarter or something, so you have like a costume prop, wardrobe, whatever thing. I heard that.
Yeah, he's just building props in his head now.
Okay. But you know, that you could, or even a workspace, even like a workspace. You know, there's a table saw and and stuff like that. So all the LARPs can come together and share these resources that we're building or something. I mean, how awesome would that be?
LARP makerspace, oh god.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
You know, so something like that goes in the community, and it's like, we're so strong, we're so passionate, we're so talented, LARPers, us LARPers, to do it. It's like, you know, I so want to encourage people working together, trying to, even if you don't like what they're doing, it's an in addition to instead of. And to me, it's like anybody's just LARPing or gets into LARPing or strives on like one way. Even if you never play any of my games, and if you know, don't like any of the kind of style of games that I'm doing, at least you're doing it. And sooner or later, I think it's a pay it forward that's going to come back to me. Either you're sooner or later going, I'm kind of tired of that right now. And you kept telling me this for years and years. Let me try this crazy LARP we're going to do. Or that person talks to someone else and is positive and says, you know, I'm LARPing, and this other person says, what kind of LARP you're doing? Oh, I don't like that kind of LARP. Oh, I know this other guy who's doing something. Oh, that sounds interesting. So they might bring in someone else to it. And it's just like, as long as we're enthusiastic, encouraging, working together, you know, it's so much stronger, I think.
A great thing that also can come out of it, and from positive side, is if you do get, you know, speaking about things and that bitterness can fall away, the games can actually start working together in a more fundamental way. Like, for example, Michael and I had this conversation, what was it, last year, where we prepared games for other conventions, and we were talking about DexCon, which is coming up on the East Coast, and we were realizing that, like, our teams are presenting multiple games, and we're going to need to invest a great deal of resources and time. Well, hey, Michael, what time are you running that game? Do you need me to NPC? Or like, or there was another game that was asking, like, hey, we need a sound system. Do you have a sound system? And so basically, like, we don't all have to go out and spend, like, out of pocket. We can all start pooling resources. So I think that when you start talking to each other, also on a practical level, where it goes away from the, like, I'm stealing your players. Now it's like, hey, can I help you bring cups to your LARP? Can I assist you in carrying things? Can I help store stuff? When you start realizing that, like, we're all doing the same things, we all kind of need the same stuff, everybody needs duct tape, let's all, like, buy duct tape together, then you realize that it's no longer about I'm trying to build my own thing, but we're building together. And that can help really take away that, like, that feeling of I'm taking from Aaron. And now it's like, no, yeah, exactly, now we have, he's now upgraded.
I escalated.
But now we're actually together building like a larger thing together. And nothing, I think, gets people more jive and more together than building and creating together.
Running, what you suggested is running LARPs at other people's LARPs. That's one of the interesting things that I thought was really good, is running someone else's LARP. So this documentation that Sarah was talking about and getting that, the idea of, like, you know, bringing someone in and it's like, oh, I don't really like what you're doing, but you know, would you run something or kind of run something that you're looking at or help them with the rules or something like that can increase the community sort of thing. It's like, you know, I'm flying to this other place, can I tell them about your LARP and things like that? That also helps. You don't always have to run your own invention, sort of thing.
I was just going to say a couple of comments back when we were talking about a makerspace. One thing that they do have in pretty much each of the Scandinavian cities, I think, is a LARP factory. So they basically, the Oslo one, I think, just closed down, which is very sad. But the idea is that they have spaces where they do have like a ton of costumes, and LARPers, you know, for all different kinds of games can come and they can share ideas. They're also having a LARP design school, summer school and winter school. I think they have now. They're running it in, I believe, in Lithuania, unless it's changed.
No, yeah, Lithuania.
So, you know, having master classes where GMs can go learn to GM, where people can like share ideas, where, you know, I mean, we even at Living Games, even though it was technically an academic conference, we had some people who run games come and they were able to share ideas, and it was actually really, really fruitful. So.
Do you guys have, out on the East Coast, like fighter workshops or role-playing workshops?
Individually, there are fighter practices.
Fighter practices, do you have?
Yeah, on a small scale.
Okay, yeah, because we have a bunch out here, and I find those are really good. There's a lot of fighter practices here in Southern California, which are great to go to, because then it's just like, you're just Boffer-style LARPers coming together, and you'll talk about, and you'll kind of run simulations like, well, we use full contact or light contact touch for this, and you'll do different things like that. I'm hoping to get role-playing, you know, workshops and things like that. So this is where, again, you look at the boundaries. We're LARPing, we're not individual LARPing. You know what I mean? They're this game, it's this whole style, and we all role play, we all fight in here or something like that. We can all kind of talk about it.
Yeah. One of the things on the East Coast, now that I've graduated, I want to work on is actually doing sort of a LARP maker space for writing LARPs. Not like building, but for actually like teaching role playing to people who have never role played before, A, and then B, also just bringing people together to learn how to kind of build LARPs from the ground up. So like there are spaces that are going to be helping to build these communities together. Let's get more questions or comments. Anybody? We still have time.
We solved all
Did we
the
exhaust
answers.
you?
Yeah.
Did we?
The bar's over.
We talked a lot.
There are no questions left.
Some of us are also starving, and
Oh, yeah, it's
We
late,
can
too.
wrap, okay.
Yeah, if you guys
We can
are.
go longer, but we don't.
Do you guys have anything else?
Yeah.
if you
Sure,
have
go
a
ahead,
dozen-
yeah.
if you have a dozen questions, I will say.
Yeah,
answer any
I'm good.
questions.
I have a question. There's, I guess it's something we sort of touched on at the beginning was sort of this plea idea or some like intense in-game interaction, sort of poisoning an out-of-game relationship afterwards or something, and ways to resolve that or attitudes to take with that. And I think everyone's got their own favorite. But something I sort of noticed really early on is that because LARPers are really friendly people, it takes a lot of courage to go out there and just, I don't know, whatever you're doing, be an elf with some weirdos in the woods. But you're all weirdos in the woods, so it's fabulous. But I thought just talking to somebody immediately after the game or in the coming days about whatever happened, like, man, I'm sorry I strangled you out in the woods, how are you doing? And usually they'll be like, man, that was awesome, I can't believe you caught me. Like, just saying it, I think takes all of the tension out of the air a lot of the time. Very small. Something I found is, I don't know.
No, that's a good one, actually.
Yeah.
Yes.
100%.
Just recently, last weekend, we were up at the Pacific Northwest game, and one of the local players, without boring you all with telling you how cool my character is, one of the local players did something that to our group was exceptionally stupid. And so as it was all kind of culminating, one of the Jersey people was probably about this far from his face, explaining in no uncertain terms with a knife how badly he was going to murder him and how terrible a human he was and how stupid he was.
Pointing out that the parents were married at the time of birth.
Yeah, there were various insults being thrown, and for an unrelated reason, there was a very brief hold called. So everybody just kind of, hold is in PR, you stop. Usually it's for a safety issue. And so everybody just kind of drops character for a second, and it just happened to in that moment, the Jersey player was like, hey, just so you know, cool, right, we're good, whatever, and everybody laughed. Game went back on, and he immediately went back to screaming in his face. About 10 minutes later, I had him killed. Now, I never met this player. Honestly, I can't even remember what his name is right now. But I saw a post he posted up on the DR group on Facebook, how awesome that was. And he mentioned specifically that he really appreciated or just enjoyed the fact that there just happened to be that very threefold right in the middle, where Jeff was able to establish, like, oh yeah, I know New Hampshire, your parents are married, very nice. None of these feelings are real life. And he went back, and this guy's a fairly new player, and is thrilled that scene happened, even though it resulted in him dying terribly. So, establishing.
Sarah, before you go, I just want to give an anecdote that's on the other side of that, unfortunately, which is I had an experience where I've been LARPing for about 8 years, and I ended up in an interaction with a player, an extended interaction, which was rather negative for our characters, and it turned into a situation where he did something in character that I personally out of character felt was over the line between like what should happen. Like, it's something that can be read as very misogynistic towards women, and I read it very badly as a player and as a character. But when I tried to approach the player, the communication didn't go well, and I tried it again, and it still didn't go well. I had been friends with that person before. Afterwards, it really spoiled our friendship, and I was not able to continue not only speaking to him out of character, but we couldn't role play together anymore. And I certainly afterwards, like, he itches around me and I itch around him. And I feel really unfortunate, like, that this is really unfortunate that it happened. So I'm all about the fact that, like, these situations need to be talked about, like, afterwards. And Sarah here is an expert on these things, so I'm going to then, go ahead, Sarah.
Okay, the next panel is Sarah talks about lead.
I'm not going to go with that. But yeah, I mean, part of my study dealt specifically with this issue and how to sort of minimize negative lead, as you call it. Talking to people directly oftentimes is great, but in certain situations it's not going to work. Having a mediator, like a GM, that might be able to like field things can often help. Like a neutral third party can be helpful. Generally, though, what a lot of LARPers will do is they won't talk it out, and they'll hold a grudge, and then years and years go by, and it becomes a huge thing that could have been diffused immediately. Another situation, another strategy is debriefing. So talking about your feelings immediately after game, either in a structured debrief where it's like moderated, or afterwards with a group of friends, which is different from a war story. War stories are, oh my God, it was so cool, my character was totally screaming in your face, man. That's a little different than, wow, it really felt like my parents screaming at me when you said that, and it really like made me feel a bunch of things. And talking deeply about our feelings, which is in some groups may be uncomfortable, but creating a community, environment where it is okay to talk about some of the intense things that we do, because these games are intense and they do get really hardcore sometimes when you're dealing with like very emotional content, and that's totally fine. But a lot of times that bleed can be decreased. Another strategy is having a de-rolling buddy, like somebody that you are sort of assigned to, like maybe Shoshana and I play a game together, and then we're supposed to email each other in a week and check in. And I'm allowed to email Shoshana whenever it's like, man, I'm having a really bad bleed today, and just like talk about what happened. For Mad About the Boy, it was such an intense game for a lot of us that, the debriefing went on for a month afterwards about the same game. So it can be, but it was so awesome to know that we had both the larger group email list, and we also had individuals. There were 3 of us in little pods that we knew that we could email to talk privately about things. So there are strategies that don't necessarily involve interacting with that particular individual, which may or may not work, but certainly, directly contacting them is oftentimes helpful. Also, it can be as simple as a smile or a hug, if they're allowed. If they allow you to hug them or shake their hand, indicating friendliness sometimes can totally diffuse things. Dropping character, changing your voice, introducing yoururself by your name instead of your character's name, that can oftentimes make things better. So there's tons of different strategies. I really like the in-game signaling, which is basically what you guys were doing. You had the opportunity with the whole to do this happen. But like Aaron talked about, doing the okay check. So, you don't have to necessarily break character. Like, let's say I'm screaming in your face and you do this, and the person does this back, that means, okay, it's all right to go. There's also cut and break and lots of other kinds of signals.
Those are Nordic techniques that are meta techniques that can often be used to stop a scene. And in dystopia, actually, this is one of the reasons I actually felt comfortable at dystopia with engaging with a lot of serious content, was the idea that you can always walk out of a scene if you didn't feel comfortable, which I've oftentimes seen people not do in a lot of games, where situations can get really intense in games. You know that you might be yelling in a person's face the next minute, you might have murdered their sire in a vampire game, and people often feel like they don't want to break the immersion of the game to engage with the fact that they are having uncomfortable situations. I've spoken about this. I am a firm believer in what I call the 2 feet rule. My 2 feet tell me where I go, and I can choose to use those 2 feet to leave a scene at any given point. And I don't care if I am stopping an entire game of 300 people. My psychological and emotional health and that friendship that I have and that community feeling is more important to me than the fiction that we've created. So I will say, excuse me, I've got to step out of the scene, like this is the out of character gesture. Excuse me, I've got to step out of the scene, I got to go, it's just not for me, see you later. And I will walk out, and I will talk to the person about it afterwards or not at my leisure. But the way I explained it to a number of people is, Monday morning, I still got to go to work. Like Monday morning, it's my responsibility to take care of myself. And so I say that also about your friendships and your relationships with other players. At the end of the day, I want to be able to go to the diner and sit down and be like, hey dude, what's up, how's your mom, how's your kids, whatever. If we've had a negative interaction and we haven't addressed that, that's going to spoil that later on. So my 2 feet rule always says, if you can handle it in character, cool. If not, I'm even about breaking a scene and stepping out and being like, hey man, are we okay? Like, is this, one of my favorite examples was I got into a mage game, which was not supposed to be a physical contact game. It was a blindside theater game. And we decided to play what we call Jersey friend roles, which is, it's called that. I don't know why, but like the notion was that we actually got into it, we were yelling so much that we started tussling with each other, actually physically tussling. And we were comfortable with each other enough to just check. And as we were in each other's faces, he whispered to me, are you good with this? And I was like, yes, I'm fine. And it got to a point, however, at one point in the tussle, things changed. And that can happen at LARPs, it can just change on a dime. And when he grabbed me by the really close to my neck, that's what did it. And I said, stop. And the minute that happened, he was like, okay, we stopped, we disengaged. And afterwards, we checked to make sure everything was okay. And we talked about it afterwards. But each of those steps along the way kept it from being something that would blow up into something later. And we didn't have a structure. We just figured that out as it was happening. But I've seen instances where people haven't figured that out as it was happening. So having those things as part of communal understanding, I think can really help from creating a community of misunderstanding, which oftentimes is where these negative feelings come from.
I think
Jersey friend rule is short for You'll Grow With Friends.
I like to think that the hard rule in TR that you can excuse yourself at any time, and you can excuse yourself out of any scene at any time because you're uncomfortable, and there will be no negative in-character repercussions. Or out of character, but I guess that's assumed. I like to think that also allows people the ability to stay in scenes that maybe they wouldn't otherwise, because they know that at any point they can remove themselves, and so maybe it lets people
See how far.
I was very happy when I was at the Texas chapter of Socialization, Bravo is the name of the city, and I was visiting there. The directors explained this rule and said, if someone says they're uncomfortable to you, respect that. You don't need to question why they're doing it. They have kind of shown their vulnerability to you by admitting that something is making them uncomfortable. And so you, as the recipient of someone saying that, you got to honor that and respect that and be cool with that, because that, they're being very open. And I like that. It's like, hey, that's actually really nice. So it doesn't seem like you're saying you can run away whenever you want. It's like, no, you're actually doing something strong. When you're admitting to someone else, I'm very uncomfortable with this. And something like that. I know John Stab a long name has. I named names. That's why I did it wrong. Has the X card. So you put an X. This is kind of more of a tabletop sort of thing. You can just draw an X on a table, and if the scene gets uncomfortable, you can just kind of point to it and back off from it. You just point to the X. And we're talking about a lot of the violent or aggressive sort of things, but this can totally happen in intimacy. in the love or sexual, sort of things where I was in a LARP where I just started, and part of this becomes because you're dealing a lot of times with strangers. And I was in a LARP, and it was kind of fun. I was playing like a fraternity guy, and this person I've never met before, and like 5 minutes in the game, so the woman like caresses my face, and it didn't freak me out, but it's like, I did not expect you to touch me. And I was expecting like something, and suddenly I am touched on the face, and it kind of threw me a little bit. No, I'm okay with it, I'll go, but I wasn't expecting that, and I wish there was some kind of, like we knew each other, like we didn't have a pre-LARP workshop, we didn't have anything before, and there was no structure. That's when things get unusual. The more community development we have, the more meetups that we have, the more conventions we have where we can talk to these people back and forth and get to know the person ahead of time, the more comfortable I'm doing it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think we've actually LARPed as characters together.
Ever, no.
Ever. But I would totally, you know what I mean? So Shoshana and I would be comfortable because we have it, because I know Shoshana, but we've never actually LARPed together. But because this community, at least us, together, we can go a little further in the LARP, or at least I'm assuming that, we can, or at least we have a...
One day we'll find out.
We'll find out. We'll find out if I can take the Jersey roll or not, but...
Not with me, you can't.
This community sort of thing, I think, helps all of that, and so all the stuff that sort of been suggesting as I type on, is that this will just make the LARPs better and avoid the stuff we have this community instead of less try me, my game.
And the shared language that we talked about also, this is the last thing I'm going to add, is the shared language will help. To give a brief anecdote, and then I want to toss out one last question to sort of wrap up as Aaron was saying. I went to Knutepunkt, and then Chris has a question. So I went to Knutepunkt in Norway last year and got a chance to play a very intimate game about romance and relationships. So it wasn't about violence. We handled that in zombie games all the time. And I'd never met the person who was going to be playing my lover, basically, which is, and I have like physical boundary issues with people I don't know. And so all of a sudden, they were like, okay, here are the techniques in case you're not comfortable with anything that's going on. So by the end of the game, I was comfortable enough with this person who I had met 5 minutes before, who was a very intense LARPer also, to basically, we were like slow dancing together, like face to face by the end of it. And I walked out, and we became friends like after that immediately. And it was probably one of the most like intense emotional experiences. But I had the red light, green light option. So there was they basically were like, okay, if you feel okay accelerating from from where you are, you can say green light, everything's good. If things get uncomfortable, you can say like yellow light, back it up. And if you hit something that you just, no way, just red light, and you can step back and everything is disengaged. So this, along with cut and break, or we're stepping out of character, all these techniques, if they become a staple of your community, can diffuse these situations. But that language has to be understood by everybody involved. So if he hadn't understood if I said yellow light to back up, then it's useless. So everybody has to accept the same standard. And so I like to think of it as like, it sounds weird, but the lowest denominator is the standard. Any games that I run that have physicality where we talk about it, like I go around and say, is it okay to touch shoulders? Is that good? Like, are you okay with hugging? Is anybody not okay with that? If somebody says, I'm not even okay with somebody touching me at all, that is my standard of the game for small games especially. But like that, you have to make sure that everybody is understood where the boundaries are and how do you get it out of it. That's at least my tip down. Chris had his hand up.
Michael brought up an interesting point very early on in a lot of this discussion about thinking about ourselves instead of being in a community where it's the game that's the community, but that we're, instead of being game as community, that we're in a community and we're participating in the game. My question for you guys is, in terms of best practices or things that can be done structurally, what type of things could be done to encourage people to kind of commingle or interact outside of the game that they're a part of? Because I think one of the things that oftentimes happens is, in terms of time, money, and resources, we oftentimes participate in a game, even though there's a broader community around us. We stick to that game, and very rarely do we have opportunities to engage with somebody else that's outside in a different game, where we could even hear about oh my gosh, you're doing a steampunk western, that's so awesome, I would love to try that. And here I am doing a zombie game. what could be done structurally to encourage that engagement?
I think one of our best techniques that we can use is actually directly related to conventions. One thing I would love to see that I haven't seen at any convention yet, when you sign up for a game block, this is a larp I'm going to play, either I've heard about it or my friends are playing it. You also, you can get a less expensive in, even if it's like $1 or $2, if you are put into a randomizer to play a completely new game, something you've never heard of before. Conventions are one of the few locations where you have a number of games under the same roof. So it's one of the few locations where we have effectively like a LARPing buffet, where you can go, well, I like the garlic string beans, but hey, I'm going to try this over here.
It's the salad bar board.
Yeah, very much.
You would start with the garlic.
Yeah, I would. Garlic's good.
We set up out of game. I don't even want to use the word events. We do set up, real world events where we get together for, we go to the beach or we go to the movies, where we're real people. But we also, we set up a lot of charity events. I like to use the DR community to do good things, which is useful both because we're doing something good and because we do things like we did a build weekend for Habitat for Humanity this year. We did a blood drive. Habitat got people in the same place. Blood drive was all over the place. I had a bunch of people from Texas who donated and sent pictures and all over the place. But they're things that let people interact as real people while still being within kind of the umbrella of DR. It wasn't Castor that donated blood. It was Michael, and I'm clearly seeing a picture of on Facebook of Michael donating blood, or it's that's Jana up there on the 2-story scaffolding, not her character, and so it gives us that opportunity to interact as real people.
So, again, we run the LARP meetup, so that's a monthly thing, non-denominational. I also think it's really important for people to have like one-shot nights, and it takes them it takes them some organization, and it is sort of, by nature probably somewhat exclusionary, just depending on the game that you're playing. Maybe it has only 10 players that can fit into it, or maybe you're playing something more open-ended. I mean, having, we're heading into off-season now for DR Bravo because it's hot. So, we're talking about ways that we can keep the community together over the summer. And one of the things we're talking about doing is doing like one-shots, maybe running Monster Hearts or running House of the Blooded, or just, something fun at the house where people can still kind of hang out, and that community can go outside of the framework of that particular fiction.
Actually, meant structurally, what did you mean by structurally? Because do you mean something like that the game designers, game organizers are setting up?
I'm thinking more of either activities or things that we could encourage. I'm thinking that a lot of times we often live in the game that we play the most, or the game that we tend to go to the most. But then we don't oftentimes think of the broader community outside of that. And so in that sense, I'm thinking of, is there things that we could be encouraging people to embrace as, organizing a factory in a city, or, developing a convention, or working on running a festival or something like that people could network together.
Absolutely, factory, convention. I think also, like, even if you're in someone who's not like doing a LARP that you can do, that you're still involved, you might want to ask them a question, just be a listener to them, be a de-rolling partner to them, and just see what they're going. Ask them like to borrow stuff, or hey, I know your game's coming up, let me borrow, do you need to borrow this? Do you need, find out when their games are, so you're not going against it, or thinking like, hey, they just had their big, huge, epic battle this weekend, do I want to do a huge, intense, emotional thing 1 week later? Something like that. It's just sort of, I think structurally for me is an awareness would help the community aware of what other games are there, what is going on, are they having problems? Is there something that happened? Letting them know if you have something, like you're at a campsite and the water pumps break, that you might want to let them, know, like, if the water pumps are broken, sorry we did it, just keep in mind, and just, I think an awareness of just
Septic tank problem.
yeah, that your awareness of it just becomes, it's an attitude. So my idea of structurally, I'm thinking is like an attitudinal community thing to go, is what my recommendation is.
And on my side, I think, so being a LARP nomad helps, like if you want to be somebody who helps to like create these structures, you can go to another game and say, hey, you know what would be really great if we could all learn how to make better monster costumes. So why don't we come together with like all the people who are interested, like I know this one guy who's really awesome at it, let's create a class. Like I've been thinking about doing this and getting Darren to like teach us how to make those things. But like just get a bunch of people and like I bet that, I might end up making a vampire because I'm gonna need like this really creepy vampire thing, but you're gonna make a kaiju and like the other person's gonna make whatever that they need and everybody can come together and learn in one day. I think another thing is just making setting up workshops that are important about things like writing better plots, using intellectual properties in games. Like I'm doing Harry Potter, he's doing Harry Potter, I'm doing Dresden. Like how do we use those intellectual properties better? How do we do things with meta techniques from the Nordic games in American stuff? And you bring in people and sort of skill share in the community because we have this stuff among us. We have people with thousands of hours of experience in everything. A musical person can come in and teach us how to make soundscapes, right? But every game is going to need this. So let's advertise together. And the way that you would do that is by me reaching out and saying, hey Ashley, let's set something up with Dystopia, and I'll bring the Dresden players, and you bring that. And if it's if Board 5 is on the California side, I'd be like, hey Aaron, let's do that. Reaching out to people that you know are embedded in each of the communities. But to do that, you need to know who is embedded in each of the communities. You need to go out and make friends outside of your own little pocket.
Sorry, I just got two ideas real quick that would actually be great based on what you said. Two things I think would be great for structurally is bulk buy whatever thing that are like headbands. Like we all use colored headbands. Do a huge, get all the games and use colored headbands and go to the fabric district and whatever and just do a bulk buy. And we all split it up and we all kind of work together to cut it up. The other one that would be really interesting is an ad buy. What if you guys pooled your resources and got a TV ad or a radio ad and list all the LARPs, 4 or 5 LARPs listed in one newspaper ad or radio ad or something like that. So give the LARP community the LARP calendar for this summer, and you just put them all, but you all bulk bought into that ad. Pooling your resources together. To talk about all your
something I've started working on as a project right now, just VR, but makes you the address.
Yes.
Yeah. But I've started putting together with some of my team, and we're just doing it with VR right now because you got to start somewhere. Is a YouTube channel. Yep. Which because we're national or international, getting a bunch of people together is hard. I would have to just focus on Jersey or Bravo or wherever. But we started working on putting together a YouTube channel of. I kind of call it How to DR, which isn't entirely the purpose of it, but the videos right now, the first kind of stage is videos on how to costume for DR, how to costume on a budget, how to camping, LARPing and camping intelligently, which I want to eventually expand into a 4-minute on the idea of yes and, which is a thing we do a lot in VR, and we try to really, and stuff like that, and stuff to kind of build, how to make good props, how to make, how to accessorize your character so that it looks like a real person. I got a list at home, it's a mile long of all these different ideas, and that's kind of along that line is, I'd love to bring in, we've got, Sky, some of these names you guys know, Skylar is awesome for makeup, so I'd love to have, Skylar come in and do a video for us, and Darren is awesome at big monster props, so we'd love to do something like that. And the reason we're kind of going in that direction is because then anybody can access it.
And that would be a great resource like on LARPing or something. So even you can even say in the beginning of the video, this is DR specific, but this would probably help you with your game, and then that then gets connected to a larger LARP community.
And we've been talking to a guy named Dimitri who lives in Germany. He plays Haven, plays Fate. It's a Fate.
Fake horror.
Yeah, it is a post-apocalyptic game in Germany, and that man is better at costuming post-apocalyptic.
Did he do the leather jacket?
He did the, yes, he does the
That's
leather
Dimitri.
jacket.
He's hysterical.
Yeah.
And also super cool. He's actually making a jacket for me right now. But we've been talking with him because he does videos on like doing costuming for that setting, and so that sort of, we're reaching out and just kind of pulling from these people who are super talented.
And the resources, the fact that the internet allows us to do this is changing the scope of what we can reach. I mean, like, to give an example of a game that's being run this year, shameless plug of like this great project is there's going to be a Harry Potter game that's going to be in a castle in Poland in November. And when the game came out, it literally was announced and in one day it pretty much sold out. But it's got an incredibly diverse player base where I think a huge ton of Americans and people from all over the world are going over there. Well, then Michael reached out, to Klaus Rostad, who's the man who's, in charge of that project, and said, well, I'm going to be running a Harry Potter game at this convention this summer at DexCon. Can we sort of network the games together? So I'm, for example, going to be playing in Michael's game, where I'll then be able to take my character over there and play it there. So like these ideas that like these projects were completely disparate, but now they're coming together, means that like we are, in my eyes, stepping outside of that place where we were having these little provincial games, now, and now we can create these international experiences where, I'm going to be flying to Poland to go play a game with people that I see every day, here in New York, which is weird, but also with Polish LARPers, and like that experience alone is something. Or I see Sarah once every few years, but we fly out now and go to community club together. You know what I mean? So like that community of coming together is a change that is recent, I think, and that is growing significantly.
If we stop hiding, we find other people who do what we love.
And we make better awesomeness out of it. So
Yeah.
So go for it.
We more awesome.
Yeah, Aaron made a comment earlier, and I absolutely agree that I think we are on the cusp of LARP changing.
Oh, yeah.
We are watching the tide roll in.
Which is fantastic, because when we're cantankerous and old, we'll be able to say, in my day, we had to make it out of plumbing supplies.
And I think on that note, that would be a great place to
Let's continue the LARP community at the bar.
Yeah, agreed.
Or
the
the
buffet.
Or the buffet, 'cause I'm hungry. Yeah. So
Bar buffet.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.